And so basically I told them that I'm quitting. I'm not the Golden Bird anymore. I'm taking the sign down. And I said, I gotta have a name that'll be at least as good as the Golden Bird or better. I had all these benchmarks.
Okay.
I gotta have a product that's gotta be at least as good as Golden Bird or better. So we changed the name and became this new image called Honey's Kettle Fried Chicken. But I always tell people I've been working on this recipe probably up to the last 6 months where I haven't had to do any more on it. Meaning that the ratio of water to the batter, the spices and seasoning, and the raw chicken itself, all these things I'm working out because the main thing I'm trying to do now is to have it where it can be duplicated wherever it is in the world. My story is actually a story of watching a guy who was like probably as famous in the local community as Colonel Sanders was around the world.
Yeah.
And this guy, I always say he was one of the greatest men in the chicken business. And I watched everything this guy did. I talked to him. I looked at everything he was, talking about when he came to the warehouse complaining to me about something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I didn't know that all that was going to play into what eventually happened to me.
So, because it's very interesting, the Golden Bird, because I do remember it being everywhere and just like, I feel like after 2000, it kind of just
Yeah,
little by little, the locations stopped dropping.
yeah.
But I would love to know what was some of his little, what, what made him so popular? Like, how did he grow? That's definitely had to be a method.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, when he started on Normandy and Adams
yeah.
in 1953, right in there, 53, 57, somewhere in there, he came out with a half a fried chicken. It was a whole half of the chicken and a roll and a pickle. I think by that time it was like $1.50 or something like that.
Wow.
He became wildly successful, and people who knew about it were lining up, like some of the lines you see at some of these other
Yeah.
famous places. And he just took off like from the 50s.
Yeah.
Sugar Ray Robinson, Cassius Clay at the time, all these, legendary black people were going to this place. And it was because he had this technique for, kettle frying chicken is essentially what it was. That had they named it Golden Bird for a good reason. It was very gold.
Mm.
I came into the company in 73. He was still going pretty strong at that time, but things were starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
He had grown past the original one. He had another one in Compton on El Segundo across from
Mm-hmm.
Centennial High School.
Mm-hmm.
And that place used to blow through chicken like you would not believe.
He had one on La Brea and Pico too.
Yeah, he had it there. Eventually, they had it got up to as many as 10 operating ones. But my store that I got was a franchise. It was actually the store number 14.
Mm.
So I had worked with the company 10 years, and then they were talking about franchising. Part of it was sort of to save the company because everyone was starting to encroach on its market share.
Mm-hmm.
They were bringing in Louisiana chicken. They were bringing in
Pioneers.
you fry, you buy, you eat fry.
Yeah.
They had the Pioneer came in, El Pollo Loco. All of these places started surrounding him.
Yeah.
And where he had free reign of the community, he lost that. So he had some consultants came and say, well, this is a franchisable concept and you should franchise it. And so in 83, they were trying to move in that direction. I was in those meetings. So they needed a guinea pig. They called me the guinea pig. They needed a guinea pig, somebody that knew something about the business that would go out and learn this thing called franchising. And I raised my hand. And then it took about 2 years from the time I was told about it till the time we opened in March of 1983. There was a lot of going back and forth in the family. They didn't really want to do it. They were opposed to doing it. It was a big, big backstory as to that part. But I got them to sign that document when the consultants at the meeting were starting to try to tell me, get ready for this. The family
Yeah.
doesn't want to do this. And this isn't going to happen. And I was sitting there in the meeting. I'm like, and I said, I'll never forget my famous words were, can I turn your attention away from this stuff you guys
Yeah.
are talking about to what we're here for?
Yeah.
And eventually we signed that contract that I should frame. I still have it, frame it and put it up at the
Oh, wow.
restaurant. So 1983 is when I, first day of business,
Mhm.
1983,
And how
with
that
the
worked?
franchise. You know, to tell you the truth, it was a failed location. And they were going to start it with a failed location.
Oh.
So it wasn't going to ever get better. It was, in a bad location.
Mhm.
It was had crime problems. It had social problems.
Yeah.
When the rest of the country was in a recession, it was in a depression. It never came out of the depression.
Mm.
So, but I had my youth. I mean, I was like, whatever it's going to take, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I basically survived those years when it was an impossible situation.
So now, how did you get from that to Honey Kettle?
Well, I always like to say it seemed like somebody was watching me because I was putting in my effort like I had a chain of 100 restaurants. I love that location. It was like my first bicycle,
Mm-hmm.
it was a Swin, and it was a beautiful bike when it was brand new. And I just kept loving on the business,
Okay.
believing against all odds that if I keep loving this place, some breakthrough will happen. And in everybody's life, there's always that moment
Mm-hmm.
when there's a breakthrough. So the company started really taking a nosedive, and then he passed away in '93, and it accelerated the nosedive, and they were just getting in all kinds of trouble. And then I was having a hard time getting my supplies,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, "Oh, so what am I supposed to do if the company goes under? Then what's it going to leave me with?" And I started tinkering in a test kitchen. I was messing around trying to make, a good biscuit because the biscuit cost had shot like twice, went up twice and then went up three times. So I try
Oh,
to develop a biscuit product. So I had a little test kitchen next to the restaurant,
okay.
and I would tinker in there with recipes.
Oh,
And
wow.
then it got to the point where I had to tinker with the batter recipe because the batter was starting to get shaky. A
Mm-hmm.
guy was delivering it, he'd show up or he wouldn't show up. And
Wow.
so eventually, it was a sign that things were really getting bad. And eventually they said, we got to sell the name, which meant I was, a man without a country. And so it was in the year 1999 when all that happened. And, um, and then the new people came in. I had such a loyalty to the Stennis family, even to this day. I'm
Mhm.
like, I have this loyalty to this family, right?
Yes,
Because
sir.
they gave me my start in business. So I never ever thought about doing anything different until these new people came in. And I knew right away this is going to be the end of me. They came in telling me they want me to go back to paying 3.5% on advertisement, 6% on the royalties.
Mm.
And it was like, that's going to kill me for sure. And
Wow.
where I normally wouldn't stand up, definitely not to the Stennises,
Yeah.
to these people, it's like, I don't know you from the man on the moon.
Yeah.
And so basically, I told them that I'm quitting. I'm not the Golden Bird anymore. I'm taking the sign down, and I don't want to be at the company anymore. And if you have any way to stop me, which I got advice from a lawyer on this, if there's
Yeah.
any way you can stop me, you're going to need to show it in writing.
Mm.
Because my relationship was with the Stennis family, it was not with these new people.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those bold moves that I had to make. It's like, I don't want to fight this guy. This guy is 6'8". I don't want to fight him, but it looks like I'm going to have to be David here because
Yeah.
these guys are going to put me out of business for sure because they didn't like my attitude. They
Yeah.
had heard all these things about I was like a milquetoast and I was the nicest guy in the world. And
Yeah.
whatever you tell him, he'll do it.
Yeah.
But then when I realized now my survival was at stake here, I'm not doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I started getting ready because I knew the next move they were going to make was going to be to try to put me out of business. So where I had been tinkering with a batter recipe, I started going doubling down on it. And I was testing it and no, this doesn't work and testing. But I had had so much experience in the chicken business for all those years that I knew I could come up with a recipe of my own. And so after testing it for about a year and a half or so, I was getting warm in terms of would this be acceptable to the public? Because I was a no-name company once I took the sign down in Compton. I
Mhm.
became a no-name.
Mhm.
And I basically lost all my customers. I might have had a few that hung around, but because there was no sign, there was no identity as to what this is.
Wow.
So then what happened was I started to work on a name. I said, I gotta have a name that'll be at least as good as the Golden Bird or better. I had all these benchmarks.
Okay.
I gotta have a product that's gotta be at least as good as Golden Bird or better.
Yeah.
I gotta have a concept similar to the way Starbucks had a concept for coffee.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a complete concept of a fried chicken company.
Yeah.
And all that stuff took about 10 months to do. And then in the year 2000, we came out with, we changed the name and became this new image called Honey's Kettle Fried Chicken. And that was the beginning of it. And that's now 25 years ago that that happened.
And now, how long did you stay in that Compton location as Honey Kettle?
I stayed there about another, maybe almost 12 years, at least 10 years. I should have been gone kind of a lot earlier than that.
Yeah.
But again, remember that's your first bicycle? It was
Yeah.
such an emotional attachment.
Yeah.
And I was always feeling like one day this place is going to turn around. And, you know, I kept believing against hope that this thing will eventually
Yeah.
become something. And it kept giving me, no, it is never going to be anything. You need to
Wow.
get out of here. But what pushed me over was my landlord started pressing me. I
Wow.
was getting by for years without really paying the full rent.
Yeah.
And then one day, you know how they eventually turn their attention to you. One
Mhm.
day they turned their attention. This guy he's barely paying his rent. You know what I mean? How could he do that? So they sent me a notice that they're going to sue me for, you know, some large sum of money. And that, you know, what's my response? Like, you know, are you going to pay the money? Or are you going to get a payback plan? I said, no, I can't do it again. I can't get a loan. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it again.
Yeah.
So eventually we settled on it and I left the building and
Wow.
started concentrating fully on Culver City,
Wow.
which I should have been doing for the 10 years I wasted time at Compton. I should have been focused on Culver City, but there was a saving grace to keeping that Compton store. And you know what it
Mhm.
was?
What?
When I started Culver City, after 18 months, we didn't have the money to start it. So it was all
Oh,
patching it together, you know,
yeah.
a $10,000 loan here, refinance your house here. You know, we were
Yeah.
getting little pieces of loans.
Yeah.
No way to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
But we were kind of like meeting the need as the need was arising.
Yeah.
And then finally, after 18 months, and the job had stopped, and it was a total, we had paid $100,000 in rent
Wow.
without a business.
Wow.
So we're about to go under for sure this time.
Yeah.
And finally got it open after 18 months. 4 months later, the place catches on fire, an equipment failure, and the place caught on fire. And I was just devastated. I ran out of the house with two left shoes on. I was so devastated. How could this be? Was it sabotage? Was it
Wow.
arson? Who did this to me? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It turned out that I had a guy who used to open up for me early in the morning. He would come clean up, but he was deaf. You know, he didn't speak and he didn't
Yeah.
hear, but he was the greatest guy at cleaning up and he would do it and he was doing it alone in the morning.
Yeah.
Apparently, for some reason, he lit the kettle real early in the morning and earlier than he should have. And and then when the thing started malfunctioning, he couldn't hear it. So
Oh.
it would have been making a loud sound. It would have been popping like we're just
Yeah.
going to explode.
Yeah.
He didn't hear it. And then it burst into fire. And the hood system, which should have put it out, almost immediately once it got to a certain temperature, it failed. Somebody didn't do that job right when they put the hood system together. So
Wow.
all these misfortunes happened that led to this fire. It didn't burn the building down. It did some damage, but
Mhm.
most of the damage was the smoke.
And this was Culver City.
This is Culver City. And fortunately, we're right across the street from the fire department. So what
Oh,
he did was ran over to the fire department, banged on the door,
yeah.
and he spoke to them how he knew,
Yeah.
fireman. And they came over and they put the fire out, before it did
Oh,
enough damage to burn the building. I got there that day, I fell to the floor and I was on the floor in a fetal position, once again in a fetal position, saying, how could this happen? I mean, after all I went through in Compton, all the survival stuff, how could I wind up finally gonna hit a home run and then I get knocked down again? Coming back to where Compton came in,
yeah.
I had that to go back to. You know,
Mm,
if I didn't have that to go back to, who knows what the outcome would have been.
mm.
So at least I had something to keep me going.
So
And
you
so
went
that's what,
back to Compton.
yeah, I went back. I started running Compton again because during the time it took to rebuild it, which was almost 6 months, I would have had nothing but really idle time. I went back because I still had that one operating. So I went back there
Oh,
and
okay.
continued working further on developing recipes.
Wow.
Mhm. You're getting the whole story.
Oh yeah, I'm loving it. So when did you stop thinking like a cook and started thinking like a CEO?
That's a good question. Uh, I had took so much pride in being a cook that I always said, I'll always be the cook, you know what I mean? Because
Mhm,
I felt like, I needed to know everything, every little nuance of the cooking before I left that job.
mhm,
Once the Compton store closed and I started focusing 100% of my time in Culver City, one day I came in and they were waiting for me. No one had made a move towards cooking and there was a place ready to open. And
Well,
I came in, I raised hell. I was like, hey guys, I'm not the cook. Somebody should put some chicken in there because the place needs to open on time. And at that moment, I told him, from now on, I am not the cook. And that's when that part changed. And then as that changed, I started working more on the business, as they say, instead of in the business. And
okay.
even today, I spend most of my time sitting sort of in a director's chair in front of the counter so I can observe all the little things that we can improve on to
Mhm.
make it the ultimate place. And so I work on the business that way.
So and you say you wasn't a cook no more. How long did it take you to come with the like? Did you have a recipe where you knew exactly the amount of ingredients, the temperature of the oil? Did you have it all down like
I
that?
didn't have it down like that. Yes.
So when you had to transfer from you not doing it and your team doing it, was the chicken coming out exactly the way
Yes.
as if you was the cooking in the
Exactly.
beginning?
In the beginning, they needed to learn more of the technique of kettle frying,
Yeah.
but they like today they're better at it than I was
Oh
because they
wow.
can produce more of it faster that looks all the same.
Yes.
But I always tell people I've been working on this recipe probably up to the last 6 months where I haven't had to do any more on it, meaning that the ratio of water to the batter, the spices and seasoning,
Mhm.
and the raw chicken itself, all these things I'm working out because the main thing I'm trying to do now is to have it where it can be duplicated wherever it is in the world,
Yeah.
exactly how it is right now.
Mm,
So we've gotten down to a point where it's like a science. Someone could come in, have little or no cooking experience,
mm.
and before the end of the day, they may not be able to keep up if they need a whole bunch of it, but it's been so simplified. It's like it's basically foolproof.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then how long did it take you? You like you said, it came to the last 6 months, basically. So
Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh.
it's a good 20 years.
Well, more than
Fine
that.
tuning, yeah.
Actually, going back to my Golden Bird years to where I am today is 53 years. That's how long it's been involved in the whole process of what I learned from my days with the Golden Bird, what I learned when I started my own business, what I've been learning all throughout has been a total of 53 years, but it's now down to a science because, I've got a big vision on what we can do with this thing in the future. And I'm so razor focused on this particular location. A lot of people ask me, well, when are you going to move here? Going to go to Inland Empire? When are you going to go to Long Beach? And I've messed around with trying to have more than one location at a time.
Hmm.
It's best to finish what the job I set out to do in Culver City before I even think about doing anything else.